doesn't mean that everyone's going to have a gun there automatically. So
absolutely,
right.
Absolutely. But people don't stop. They see someone was killed, and they see that there are guns on campus, and guns are supposed to be the enemy there. But it's about person. We have to make sure that we are keeping these people healthy. We have to talk about mental health. Let's just talk about that more. It doesn't have to be a taboo issue. Yeah. And I hope on our side we'll talk more about that, and we won't be the reactionary side to the people who are bringing it up. Let's be the forefront and the advocates for mental health as much as we are advocates for guns. Why not?
So what kind of checks do you think are actually legit? Like if you were fresh writing the law right now.
Oh, man. I've always stuck to the fact of campus carry. I feel like when you bring other legislation in there, and that it waters down your argument with campus carry, especially, I don't see myself changing my views on the fact that concealed carry is a good way to go when it comes to going on college campus. Maybe because we still have a whole lot of other states to convince before that, and it has helped to say, look, there are these checks in place. If you are afraid of students having a gun on campus, look, the law that the state says it's okay. So I know you're a big fan of the state administrative office, so at least trust them in this scenario too. It's helped. It's helped. I will say that. So I will say that, right now, I open carry when I work at a gun range. I open carry at the gun range. Am I totally fine with that? Yeah, definitely. Am I afraid of someone else who has one? No, but I do know that there's a fear behind that, and so let's just be smart about it. Let's take back that phrase common sense and bring it on our side and use common sense with some things.
Yeah. So what about it just in the more broad sense about access to guns? Like, are you okay with that being a state right? Whatever the background check is and all that, should that all be kicked back to the states? Should it be even more local?
And I know that they do things here in California differently. In Texas. I was like, what county? Yeah. We just have all the gun lights. Let's just all be like Texas. Let's just say. I think, as a libertarian leaning person, I do believe bringing it back to the states and then having that issue, that right to that is important. Same thing with campus carry. Do I think it should ever become a federal issue? With campus carry, I think it's been good as a state by state issue. Yes, it's harder, but I think right now, having the background checks and making sure that people behind them are law-abiding citizens is important. But again, it doesn't matter on the gun control side. They'll take those law-abiding citizens and make them demons regardless. So that's what we're seeing right now, is that these law-abiding citizens that statistically have hurt less people than the general public are demonized every time these mass shootings and these things happen in gun-free zones. Right. So, I think that's what the fight is.
So are we having the same problems with the gun discussion that we're having with the terrorism discussion, in that we only talk about it right after something horrible happens?
Absolutely.
So that we can never have because then they'll say, well, now's not the time to talk about it. Exactly. And then people start screaming about it because they're upset about dead people, which is completely legit, obviously. But that in the moments between, we're not good at talking about anything, actually. That's when people just start living their lives and doing their thing. So we go from crisis to crisis to crisis, which certainly doesn't help, a calm argument, regardless of what side you're on.
And we're having that issue even now in the age of Trump, is that people... you can look at the gun industry, ask anybody right now and see if gun sales are down and ammunition is down because, first of all, people thought Hillary was going to be president, and so it went up, and then now it's down because people think, oh, it's okay, it's Trump, he's with NRA, everything's going to be fine, and they become complacent. And so it's actually harder for the people like me who are advocates to say, no, this is not going to be forever. And if you are complacent now, especially on the state level, which is where all this stuff is happening. I mean, you're seeing this right now in California, where the states are really making the decisions. And then say we get someone who's completely on the left on next time. We're already 8 years behind. So you have to continue that fight, even when it's not sexy, when you think that, on the federal level we're good. That's actually the most dangerous time, because people are not looking and people are able to get in ways that no one keeps them accountable. So that's the scary part.
Where do you think Trump fits into all this? Because the NRA loved him. He doesn't strike me as a real gun person one way or another. I mean, he's a New Yorker, so this isn't a guy that. I mean, maybe he had security. I'm sure he has security that walks around with a gun. Obviously, now he's a Secret Service, but like his whole life, he lived in the liberal bubble of New York City.
Liberal.
I don't think he. I don't like. It just doesn't strike me as
Guns
an
are there.
issue of his. But the NRA loved him. I think he said the right things for that group. Do you have a real sense of what he really believes?
I really think he's legitimate about, and that's why, I said people get mad at me, but it was about pro-life issues and being able to defend myself. And I felt like on those two key issues for me that he was going to be strong on them. And so far, he's been very strong on both those issues. I don't see him changing fiscal issues, the budget, and healthcare. Now that I'm always open to debating him about, because I don't think he's ever was an advocate for limited government in that sense, but those two issues, I feel
right. In many ways, he was much more of a Democrat.
Absolutely.
Although right now he is chopping a lot of the federal amount that we're spending on a lot of programs.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, we'll see. Exactly. We'll see.
Let's talk about the pro-life thing for a minute. So I'm pro-choice, but I view abortion as a horrible choice. That I know several women that have had abortions. Nobody takes it lightly. Unfortunately, a lot of the messaging I think that you get from the far left on abortion is they fetishized it into almost being something cool.
Well, Lena Dunham says that she wishes she had an abortion, that type of stuff.
Yeah, no, really. I mean, you're not making that up. And I see a lot of videos on YouTube that have, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of views, where they're just talking about it in such a casual, sort of fun way. There was that video of the girl who worked at an abortion clinic who had an abortion, and she videotaped the whole thing, and there was a lot of questions as to whether she purposely got pregnant just so she could make. I mean, there's all kinds of crazy stuff. I view it as just as a horrifically impossible existential question, and that my go-to here, ironically, would be a little bit like what got Tomi Lahren in some hot water, which is that it shouldn't be the government deciding what you should do with your body. So I'll just hand it to you from there, and then we go.
Yeah, well, there's so much on that. I just know.
Come on, small libertarian.
I know, small libertarian.
Why am I wrong on that?
That is the one thing that, but actually, I can make a really good argument.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of libertarians have is that if the government's there to protect life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, I mean, you don't have any of that without life. So that's a big side with me is that. Yeah, you need to protect life. And I think that's why people are kind of getting away from that and they're going to the argument of when life begins, right? And that's why it's shifted that way because more people are thinking, no, you're right. I mean, you can't have life without, if you're going to do that. So, but I mean, I've always been,
do you like arguing in that space though? Because I think that's a healthy argument to have. Like we could, neither one of us are scientists, but we could sit here and say, I think for the first month that you can have an abortion, and I think it's a hard choice, but acceptable.
Yeah.
There's at least some room to, if you believe it's conception, then we can't quite get there on that, and that's okay. But at least there's some talking points there, right?
Absolutely. Well, there is definitely talking points, and I will be honest, I'm still trying to figure out what I believe. I will say probably right now, I still believe that it comes to, conception, that life starts there. But I'm still evolving. You can see the last 8 years that my views have changed, and that's the thing. I'm open to many things, but I will say,
well, that's refreshing.
Emotional.
I guess to say it every now and again. I'm evolving, or I'm not fully there, or whatever. Yeah,
it would be a lie for me to say otherwise. But I will say it is primarily emotional for me. I not that I've had to deal with that personally, but. Life is just something so important to me. I mean, women and children are something so important to me. And I just believe that if we're not protecting them because they are, vulnerable, they don't have a voice, then what are we really doing if we can't protect those who don't have a voice, whether that's students or that's those who are unborn. So I will say in that regards, I believe that the government should protect that right, the right to life.
So if we're doing hypothetical here, if scientists could, come down with the study that says, well, we know actually that it's not conception, but it's 6 weeks in. Something magical happens, and that's when life begins. You think you could possibly? I'm really not trying to pin you.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to, because you're saying it's about feeling. You're feeling right now. So if they came,
which I'm sure made a lot like, here you are talking about feelings and emotions.
Someone on the right talking about feelings. But if they could lay down something that said, this is what we've been able to prove. Do you think that could be enough to shift you?
I don't know. It would have to be when it gets there because it would be a lot of stuff. I'm a born again Christian, and that was 7 years ago, and so that's very important to me. And I just know that that's something that you should not be advocating for. Now, do I really think it's really that question? I think we'll have even if that happens, that there's still going to be people who are going to say, "Well, no, okay, we'll start 6 weeks, but anything after that," and then people want the right to continue on. I think that argument is not going to end. But yeah, I really can't. I can't say whether or not if the science is there, if it's going to it starts at 6 weeks. If I change my mind because of that.
Well, how about we'll do this again?
It's a good one.
8 or 10 months, and we'll see.
Okay, there you go. Well, that sounds like shift my mind. My decisions and my ideas.
But 8 or 10 months after that.
Okay, we'll continue. Where's Antonia and her political spectrum today?
The evolution of Antonia.
Yes.
There's a movie there or something.
Yes.
So as a small L libertarian, does the pro-life thing then put you in a different tough spot because you don't want the government to then have to pay for a child? But if a woman that is, poverty stricken or whatever can't afford to have this child, then the government says, well, abortion's illegal, so you're going to have this child. Does the state then have any responsibility to help them? Because you can't like that idea as a libertarian, right?
Well, I don't even get that as like someone who advocates for maybe personal responsibility to say that there's only two choices there. It's that, that the government says you can't have an abortion, so therefore it has to also take care of your children. We don't do that for anybody else. No, I mean, that's not, I mean, there's instance after instance where you're not doing that. So just to say that if that scenario happened, that we suddenly have to also at that time take care of that child. Of course, I think there should be some type of safety net. Most libertarians believe that. It's just how long it is to the point where it keeps someone from having that responsibility for their own life and the life that they choose to, or the life that they have and they take care of. No, I mean, I think that's where the community should come in, where the places of faith, or what other faith that you have. The people around you should be helping with that. And I think that's what we advocate for as libertarians, is that no one said that the government is supposed to be taking care of us in that way, even when it comes to abortion.
Yeah. So you basically see it's just a false choice. Basically, right? It's
to say that that's the two scenarios and that's it. You choose one, and if you're not libertarian. I don't believe that.
Yeah. All right. Well, this hour is completely blown by. So to wrap this thing in a nice bow, for all the people out there that are having their own political evolution, and I think you've been very frank and honest here and all that about your own continuing evolution, which is a beautiful thing, and that's what I try to bring to this every week. What would you say is the most important thing for someone that wants to get in the fight, even if they disagree with you politically, even if they sat and watched this for an hour and go, man, she's bonkers.
Or my hair.
Whatever. Ruben's babbling about that. But what would you say to them about just like having that moment and being able to, talk about things that your parents may not like or that your family may be upset with or any of that?
I would say, fight on. That sounds so I swear I'm 27, guys. That sounds so I'm 80s era or something. But no, seriously, it's going to be hard. If you really want to make a difference, having the conversations that are needed, most people are not going to do that. Keep at it. Because those people who believe they can make a difference are who are going to make a difference. We see it already today. So keep on, and there are other people doing the same thing. You're not alone. But it's important. We need that. We need that in this country, especially now. So.
All right. Well, this absolutely flew by. I didn't look down once. Pretty impressive. Are you impressed?
Awesome. I'm very impressed.
For more on Antonia, check out her website. It's AntoniaOkafor.com.
Bang, 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 bang. Chris Coleon.
It's simple. You have something you want to frame. Bring your favorite selfies, your masterpieces, your travel art, everything you're proud of to a Framebridge store near you. You'll work directly with an expert designer to help you choose the perfect frame and mat to complement your one-of-a-kind.
All right, so let's do this. I want to do Gun 101.
Okay.
All the things that we should know about guns. And then I want to do the most common misconceptions about guns. Because I think part of the issue right now is every time something happens, every time there's a shooting, half the people don't know anything about guns on one hand.
Start talking them up.
And give you all of those misconceptions. It gets it confusing for everybody. And even the people who I generally trust, I sense don't know exactly what they're saying. So I want to do a video with you right now where every time one of these incidences happen and someone starts asking me this, asking me that, I want to go, I've got the thing that I can point you to with the answer. So let's do Gun 101.
Okay.
What do we need to know about?
Yeah. All right. First and foremost, AR does not stand for assault rifle. So when they say AR-15, that's not assault rifle. It does not mean assault rifle. An assault rifle is a gun that is fully automatic. Right. That means I pull the trigger, I hold it back, and it expends all of the ammunition in the magazine.
That's Jesse Ventura in Predator.
Boom.
Okay, right. That's a great gun.
Yeah, love that gun. Right?
Not gonna argue about it.
Not gonna say I wouldn't mind owning it. But,
so that's automatic. Just holding it down,
and it will fire every round subsequently until it's completely out.
Okay.
Right. And it does so at a very high rate of speed. Generally speaking. Semi-automatic. So now there's been this thing where people conflate this or use semi-automatic as a kind of a hyperbolic way of characterizing guns as death killing machines, right? Virtually every modern gun is semi-automatic. And what that means is one press of the trigger, you get one bullet versus holding the trigger down once and getting all of the bullets.
Okay, so that's a great distinction right there, because often when this happens, you see people saying we have to ban semi-automatics.
Yes.
Semi-automatic.
That's virtually every modern gun.
Yeah, it's just so it's not because the only difference between that and a
fully automatic.
What's one that you're just loading one bullet in?
Okay, so that would be a bolt action.
Okay,
right. So there's fully automatic, semi-automatic, and bolt action. Right. Bolt action is more like hunting, right? Or high precision shooting.
Yeah.
And it's a bolt because it allows you to build the gun up in such a way where it's the tighter constraints within the gun and allows you to be more accurate.
Okay.
Right? Without certain mechanisms moving back and forth, throwing off the accuracy of the shot.
So you would say then that when all of these people come out and say we have to ban semi-automatics, that they are actually just flat out confused, or intentionally inflating or obfuscating what the truth is related.
Yes, absolutely. And so it's either they're confused, ignorant, or they're doing purposely, like you just stated.
Okay. So let's do some NRA stuff while we're doing this. What is the NRA stance on automatics? Just being able to hold and shoot.
I mean, the way it's currently regulated is the way it stands. Like right now, there's in order to get an automatic gun, there's a certain process you have to go through in order to get them, and that it's been that way for a very long time now, and that it exists as it does now, and that's essentially where the stance is with respect to fully automatic guns.
What are people using fully automatic guns for?
So,
because I think this is where you'll hear people go, well, no one needs an automatic to hunt.
Well, see, here's the thing, though. It's the idea of putting it under the guise of needing, right? Name another right where we use that same standard. It begs the question. And so it's like, okay, you have a fully automatic gun and you have semi-automatic guns, you have bolt action. There are different reasons why you would want each of these guns. Now, I can delve into that, but then that starts getting into the very nerdy side of firearm ownership, where the enthusiast aspect of that comes into it, is understanding tactically why you would want certain things. And so for me, I don't have a problem with people owning fully automatic guns personally. I just don't see that as a significant danger above and beyond, say, owning a nuclear suitcase, right? So if people tried to make that absurd argument to me before, it's like, well, then why don't you be allowed? Well, that's because there's a cost-benefit ratio that doesn't make any sense. Right, that's inherently self-destruction. So how is that protecting you in any way from the very thing that you're supposed to be protecting yourself against?
Do you think there should be a higher threshold to be able to get an automatic than some of the other weapons you're talking about?
Me personally, threshold in what respect? Like in terms of
either higher graded background checks or references.
So let's talk about background checks for a minute. So there's this idea and this notion that we don't have background checks for our guns. We do. And the funny thing is, we in the gun community have become a victim of technology. And what I mean by that is people think that just because I can go into a gun store, if I really wanted to, I can go to a gun store right now, buy a gun within 2 minutes. Just like that.
You can.
Yeah.
Because you've done all of the background stuff.
See, that's the thing though. I'm undergoing the same processes.
Right.
So I go into the store, I find a gun. I like this gun. I say I want to buy this gun. I fill out the form 4473, which asks me a series of questions. Then they take that information and they submit it to the FBI database and they do a background check. But it happens instantly because technology, right? It's interesting because there's a lot of people who feel like I should undergo some type of CIA investigation before I buy a gun.
The same people who also hate the government.
Exactly, right? So when the instant aspect of the background check causes people who don't know very much about the process to think that there isn't, right? Just because I can buy the gun easily doesn't mean it was done thoroughly. You know what I'm saying? I underwent the background check. There's a system there. They check it against the system. If I don't have any felonies or anything that prevents me from owning a firearm, I'm allowed to buy the gun.
Okay, so when people say there are no background checks or background checks aren't tight enough, or however you want to extrapolate that, is there any credence to any of that?
So now let's talk. So I think what you're kind of going into is universal background checks, right? So when they say universal now they do conflate these terminologies. There's universal background check is a very specific statement. It's not like saying Coke, right? Because people hear universal background checks and all they hear is the background check part. That universal means something. And what that means is it's a requirement that on every single transaction you have to undergo a background check, even private transactions, right? So right now in California, if I had a gun, right, I can bring a gun into California, I just can't carry it. But you're like, hey, you know, Collins, I like that gun you have, right? I want to buy it from you. In California, I can't sell it to you, right? Now, here's what I can do. I can say, all right, cool. When I get back to Texas, I'll transfer the gun to a gun store here in California if it's on the specific list that allows you to actually own that gun.
Right, because California has a designated list.
Exactly. List. Yeah. And then you would have to go to the gun store and then buy it, right? Now, let's say I decided to give you the gun anyway, privately, right now, in this room. No one else is here but you and I sell you the gun. I'm sure they can. Yeah, I mean, you know, I don't have any plans on going to jail. And I sell you the gun. And then let's say you have the gun. What is there to check against? What database is there to check against to determine whether or not you got a background check for that gun? Now, I just conflated two issues right now.
Yeah. So, well, if we did it on the DL, there's
no way. Yeah. And that's what the whole concept of the universal background check is. It is to require a background check for every private transaction. Now, legally right now, I can't do it. But like in Texas, I can sell a gun to a friend. And as long as I know he's not a prohibited person and I know he's not a felon, I can sell him that gun. No problems. That's completely legal. What the universal background check idea suggests is he should be required to undergo a background check before I can sell him that gun. That would mean he and I would have to go to a gun store and undergo a background check. Then he can go and buy the gun from me.
So is the problem with the way it is currently, say in Texas, the way you're describing, that you just would not know potentially enough information about the person you're selling?
Yes, that's a potential. Absolutely. And so the reason why I'm against the universal background check is because there is no other way to enforce it but for a national gun registry. Because otherwise you have nothing to check it against.
Right.
To say, if a cop walks down the street and sees you have a gun, he's like, do you need a background check for that gun? Yeah. How's he going to prove otherwise? Unless there's a national registry. And then someone's okay, fine. Well, then let's have a national registry. No. Because we've seen time and time again that when the governments have a national registry for firearms, they subsequently use it to confiscate guns. Mm-hmm. Now, the problem is when you say that, they try to put the tinfoil hat on you, right? Except because what they envision is, you know, roving truck, black military trucks coming down the street, pulling guns from people's houses. No, that's not what happens or how they do it. It's constructive. And then when you have potential presidential candidates like Hillary Clinton suggesting we should take up the Australian model, which did that very thing. They use a national gun registration to tell people to say, you know what, you need to turn in your guns. It's a voluntary buyback. No, it's it's a mandatory buyback, right? So, and if you don't sell your guns back, guess what? You go to jail. That's a confiscation.
Yeah.
It's a constructive confiscation, but a confiscation nonetheless. Just because they didn't roll the military trucks down the street and pull them out of your house doesn't mean it isn't confiscation. And so that's why I'm adamantly against universal background checks unless you can demonstrate a way for me for it to be applied in such a way that would not require gun registry, because I do not trust my government not to exploit that registry in their favor.
Yeah. So how much of this then, because we talked about it, you said to me right before we started, you're sort of a libertarian. I think it's exactly what you said. I don't want to put words in your mouth. How much of this does go back to that states should be able to make the decisions that they see fit? I mean, I suspect you probably wouldn't be that thrilled living in California other than the weather. I'm here in California.
Weather, the women, the food.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, we got some pretty good food in Texas.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, I'm not complaining about that. So, see, that's just it too. It's like, well, how far do those states' rights go from the standpoint of violating my Second Amendment right? Right? I believe in states' rights, right? To the point you start violating my constitutional ones. And so, when you have places like California, which I think I'm being currently violated now, the fact that I can't carry my gun. What is the difference? I can take my car with my Texas license and drive it right into California. No one has a problem with that. I can drive up and down these roads and as fast as I want, as recklessly as I want. Yeah, that might be illegal, but I can still do it. There's that potential to do it. But yet, I can't carry the thing that I carry to protect my life with the same license. That doesn't make some sense to me. Like, am I in any less danger here than I would be in Texas? If anything, I can make the argument that there's more danger for me here, and that I don't know the area very well.
So in a weird way, you're actually making a non-states' rights argument here, right? Because if you're saying you want the same thing everywhere, that's not a states' rights argument.
It's not, right? But that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's under the guise of me feeling like me not being able to carry is a violation of my constitutional right. Right? Because states' rights doesn't allow them to violate those constitutional rights. And that's the argument I'm making. Now, it's difficult because when you start talking about the idea of having a uniform, like concealed carry platform, right? Where one license allows you to carry a gun everywhere, right? Then you start getting into the weeds of, okay, well, that's violating states' rights. That's only if you don't see my ability to carry a firearm my ability to carry a firearm as a violation of my constitutional right.
So it's an interesting philosophical place to talk, because it's like, it just depends where you start.
Yeah.
Because even though I'm definitely a states' rights guy, I hear what you say there. And then on the other hand, as a states' rights guy, to me, if a state wants to have stricter laws and you're a big gun guy, then you actually are allowed to leave. It's kind of, as I would say, for virtually every other situation, it's kind of shitty.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel great to have to leave a place that you want to be at. But if they're doing things as part of their state experiment that you don't like, well, it's on you to get going.
Yeah, but if that same state creates a law that violates my right to privacy.
Right, well, we have constitutional rights that supersede. So I see. So I get the issue. Are we missing anything else on the technical front? Because we did that pretty quick.
Let's see. From a mechanical standpoint.
Just from the mechanical standpoint, or just any of the language that we use related to this. Okay.
So then, of course, there's some people can say it's trivial, some people say it's not. So the magazine versus clip. It's the general term. It's called a magazine. A clip is an actual thing. It's just different from a magazine. That's kind of slightly trivial, but it does typically kind of expose people who don't really know much about guns when you say clip versus magazine. Because the proper terminology would be magazine. As far as any other mechanical components.
So what do I need to know about the magazine?
Well, that's just terminology. It is semantics. Yeah. Right. I don't always go about correcting people because I feel like it just creates some. It kind of makes me look like an ass to a degree.
No, but that's why we're doing this. Yeah. And I want to clean some stuff up.
The biggest thing is just the assault weapon thing, right? Because the AR-15 is a civilian weapon. It's designated. The biggest difference between an AR-15 and an assault rifle is that the assault rifle is fully automatic and the AR-15 isn't. That's the biggest distinction between the two. Now, of course, then you can make the argument, well, that's a very minor distinction. You know, there are a lot of people who make that argument. But I don't look at the AR-15 any differently than I look at the handgun. in that sense.
Okay, so every time when one of these happens and we hear the AR-15 is a weapon of war,
so are handguns.
You would basically put the AR-15 and the handgun in the same category as pulling once, shooting once.
Yeah.
So that would not be categorized as a weapon of war.
Well, see, that terminology is designed to manipulate the emotions of people who don't know anything about guns. So when you hear, if you don't know anything about firearms and you hear he used a weapon of war, technically speaking, all guns are weapons of war, right?
Swords can be weapons of war.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but what that does mentally, like they understand language very well. And I say they like they're like not human. But in terms of the I call it the anti-gun side of things, they understand the use of language very well. And they confuse it purposely. So when you hear someone who doesn't know anything about firearms, think about it. Like if I'm already I'm a little scared of firearms, and then I hear he used a weapon of war, what image comes up in your mind? It's Rambo, he's running down there just going crazy. And that's exactly what he's doing. But he could do the same thing with a handgun. And so the biggest thing that I like to, when I'm having these conversations with people, is we're gonna walk away with two trains of thoughts. I'm either gonna get you to admit you just want to ban all guns, or you can see my perspective. Because if you're willing to say, you know what, we need to get rid of all the assault weapons as they understand them to be, which is essentially AR-15s. But now it's actually becoming even more broader, like we need to get rid of all semi-automatic weapons, right? That's virtually every modern gun. So let's say they want to ban AR-15s. AR-15s, rifles aren't even used. Like the percentage that rifles are used in actual shootings is so low and marginal, it's unreal. So then why are we focusing on it? But okay.
So then what are most shootings?
They're handguns.
Yeah.
Right? So if we get rid of that and we got rid of AR-15s and then we have another shooting happen, because our most deadly school mass shooting was Virginia Tech, and he used the handgun. So then what happens if that happens again? So now what are you going to ban? You're going to ban the handgun? And that's when you're stuck having to confront the fact that, okay, either you really just want to ban all guns, or you understand that the distinction is irrelevant, right? We've got to get to the absolute point of issue and why these things are happening. And focusing on the gun is doing a disservice to the conversation. It sounds like I'm using a bigger issue as a scapegoat. But in reality, if you really sit down and think about it, right, we have over 300, close to 400 million guns in this country. They're not going anywhere. And understanding that, you've got to then sit down and say to yourself, all right, if we're going to try to fix this issue of gun violence or just violence in general, we've got to get to the root of the issue of why people are doing it. And then understanding that, staying within the context of reality, we've got to understand, well, in the process, I still have to protect myself. And because people are still going to be able to get their hands on guns, whether it's legal or not, and use them to commit crimes and to threaten people's lives, I've got to be put in a situation to defend against that. So you can ban all the AR-15s you want, doesn't mean it's going to stop somebody from getting one on a black market. So now, yes, I don't run from the fact that the AR-15 is a more powerful platform. That I agree with. And I don't run from that. There are going to be people who are going to be mad at me for saying that. But the reason why I don't run from it is because that's the very reason why I want an AR-15. When it comes to defending my life, I don't want it to be a fair fight.
Right.
Period. I don't want to have to confront someone with an AR-15 with a handgun if I don't have to. If you come in my house, I'm not grabbing a handgun. I'm grabbing an AR-15.
See, we have this strange thing. It's like when people will say, okay, well, the Second Amendment says the right to bear arms, and then they'll put up a picture of, the type of arms that existed way back when. And it's like, well, then we should have the right to that, because that's what they were talking about. It's like, this is so disingenuous.
Very disingenuous.
It's like they were also talking about why you should be able to form a militia, and it's like, the thing that we'd be fighting against now has a lot more power, and it doesn't mean that just because you have some guns, you're going to be able to stop the guys in the black trucks, as you talked about earlier. But maybe you could defend yourself a little bit longer, and who knows what happens with a little bit of time.
I mean, we're going to be real with it. We're still fighting in Afghanistan, and those guys over there are shooting AK-47s. Huh. You know what I'm saying? So, like, we can't, just because we're going to lose doesn't mean you just lie down and do it. You know? And the whole notion of, like, man, I just lost my train of thought. This idea of, owning firearms to combat the government. And they think it's preposterous. So I'm like, ask the people in Venezuela. What's going on?
And again, these are now the people, at least in this current moment, the people who say that the government is run by Orange Hitler.
Exactly.
And man, it really well. This is a good spot to, I think, change some minds. And as I said to you before we sat down, I never considered myself a gun person per se. I'm interested. I'm always interested in talking about asking them. But I do find myself now more pro-gun. It's finally the right phrase to say than I've ever been in my life. But that for me, it has more to do with that I really understand what rights are in a much clearer way.
If we got caught,
and what I want the government to do and not to do. And once you understand that, then
after you're coming with that,
it's tough. It's tough to take other positions.
So it is.
So is there anything to you that when they always say sensible gun, and I'll always see the pro-gun people will say, well, the people that always say that just don't know what they're talking about. And I sense you're probably in that spot because you just say what they do with language.
Yeah. So sensible gun control. Most of the time when people say that, they actually advocate things we already have.
So background checks,
things of that nature, right? And then you have other language like the gun show, the gun show loophole.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
That's not a loophole. All that is a private transaction. That's all that is, and it's just happening. It just so happens to happen at a gun show. If you bought a gun from an actual dealer at a gun show, you still have to undergo a background check.
So when they say loophole, what they're saying is that if you are at a gun show, you're not a dealer.
Yeah.
You can actually sell that gun at the...
If the person's not a prohibited possessor, you are from the same state, then yes. If there's nothing that precludes them from owning a firearm legally, I can sell them a gun at a gun show.
Right. So the only slippery part of that is what we talked about earlier, which is you just may not know all the information.
Exactly.
So I guess there's a little bit of a gray area in that one. Is that a fair?
In terms of
that you're sort of taking somebody's word for it at that point. Right?
Yeah,
like if you just meet somebody that day and they're like, I want to buy that gun, and you say to them, you ask them all the appropriate questions, they could be lying.
Absolutely.
Right? But that's just
But then the response that they have to that is the universal background check. But as I pointed out, how do you enforce it without a national registry? And then with that national registry, even with the national registry, it doesn't stop anything, right? We tend to go down this road of just wanting to do things to make ourselves feel better. But in reality, name one mass shooting that would have been prevented with a universal background check. Not one. Because even the people who had guns who weren't supposed to have them, they got them illegally, right? It wasn't because there wasn't a universal background check that stopped them from getting it. No, it wasn't. So I have to ask the question. I go, then why are we doing this other than just to make ourselves feel better? Because it's literally doing nothing. And so that's why, like the person who bought and sold a gun privately at a gun show could have done that in the parking lot at the gun show. Could have done it at their house before going to the gun show. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But what it does is when you frame it within the context of the gun show loophole, it makes it seem like it's this bazaar where everyone comes there together and sells illegal guns, right? That's the image that's created in the mind.
Right, like it's barter town.
Exactly. Like they feed on the ignorance of people, right? Because like not everybody knows that much about guns. It's like it's one of those things. It's like I don't know a lot about a lot of other things that people may know a lot about, right? So if you tell me something and I'm not really researched and schooled on that issue, you can get me to believe some pretty kooky stuff.
Yeah. And that's what I'm talking about. I mean, that's what you consistently see every time we talk about this. And, there's this other piece of it where it's like every time a shooting happens, there's this pile-on where now we should talk about it.
Yeah.
And then there's this other part of us where it's because we go from one crisis to another that there's never really, it seems to me at this point, we never really have time to really ever fully unpack any of these things. I think there's moments like this, but on a national level, we're not particularly good at this.
No, because then what it does, it just turns into a political sparring match.
Yeah, I mean, right after the last shooting, when Dana Loesch and Rubio were on that CNN town hall, I mean, it was.
You mean the gladiatorial fest?
It was a disaster. I mean, it was everything I hate about cable news. It was everything I hate about just the quick bites of all of this and flashiness. And just who could be taken out right now.
Sound bites.
It was a disaster.
And then
chimes
said
of
it
your
in front of
ears that are
myself.
going to ring
How
bells
can we
because
have
they know
a real
you
honest
remember
conversation
the last
when
time
they
they
try to
set
paint
this spray?
pro-gun people as crazy when we say,
Soundbite.
no, the ultimate goal is to ban guns. But then I can watch a CNN live town hall where Rubio suggests you do realize banning all semi-automatic guns is essentially banning all guns, and the entire stadium erupts in applause and cheers.
Yeah.
So then it goes.
Rubio said exactly what you said,
and they started cheering. Even when confronted with the because Rubio said, "Look, you want to ban all semi-automatic guns? Here, let me educate you really quickly and tell you that's virtually all guns." So even when he corrected them, so it wasn't they can't claim they were ignorant on it because he just explained to them that means banning virtually all guns, and they erupted. So it goes, okay, so now you have all us pro gunners are like,
right? So we're just going to go back to our corner.
Exactly,
and
there's no discussion because while we're trying to be fair, your ultimate goal is to try to ban them all.
Yeah, there was that moment, I'm sure you remember this, after the Parkland shooting when they had the big rally, and one of the survivors got up there and said, we're going to come, what was the line? Do you remember the exact line where she said basically, we're going to come for the semi-automatics now, but we're going to come for everything later, something to that effect. I'm slightly butchering it, but I thought, wow, now you're flat out saying, and you're telling them now. So I could see why. I see this with all my frustrations with the left all the time. It's like, I know they're never going to stop. I've seen it so consistently, and that's why I'm staking out some positions. But sometimes it's kind of sucky to have to just be like, well, the people that I'm fighting against, so to speak, they're not dealing in the same world that I'm dealing in, and that makes it more important for me to stake out a position.
But the thing that's most frustrating about it is the way they'll color it in the mainstream media is that we're unreasonable. We don't want to move 1 inch. We dug our heels in. All we want is we don't care about anything. And really what it is no, I let you into my house and now you're trying to take my house from me. So get out. Because that's essentially what they're saying is, all right, so they'll say, well, common sense. That's why we hate that word common sense because it's disingenuous. It's like, well, we need common sense measures after a shooting. All right. And another shooting happens. We need more common sense measures. And another shooting happens. We need even more common sense measures. When does common sense measures stop being common sense and just intruding on my rights?
Yeah, and I can see that, my thing, guns to you is free speech to me, and it's like, I can see this coming with that. Like, if these guys took control, you start seeing, well, we can have free speech, but we need some common sense controls around free speech.
Exactly.
So I do understand the position.
Like, I tell people all the time, I'm like, there are over 300 federal gun laws in this country. I think we've been reasonable. I think if we were really, truly being unreasonable, we wouldn't have over 300 federal gun laws. And I can't begin to tell you how many we have on the state level, right? So it's incredibly disingenuous to think that we're just being hard asses who don't want to move 1 inch on the issue, right? No one's saying it should be a free-for-all where we're just handing out guns to everyone like Oprah, right? I don't think anybody has a problem inherently with background checks. Now, when we start talking about universal background checks, that's a different thing. But since they never want to make that distinction, right? No one ever knows that.
You can't.
Exactly. And then the idea of, like, we can talk about gun free zones.
Man, that shit was called
and it begs the questions like, what is that sticker on the window going to do for me? So now I have to make, like, people don't really like to sympathize with gun owners in the sense of, like, we all want the same result, right? We want the killing to stop. We want the violence to stop. Notice I said violence and killing, not just gun violence, right? Because we can't just focus on gun violence because violence is violence. However you die, you die. It's bad all the way around. But when I have to make a decision about whether or not I potentially break a law to go into an establishment that may or may not cause me to need my gun at some point, man, that's messed up. And I know that there are a lot of people who don't see it that way because they don't see value in the Second Amendment because they're not firearm owners, right? There are a lot of people who look at the Second Amendment as useless because they don't own firearms. But when you have a group of people who understand the importance of it and how it fits into their lives, and they understand that at the end of the day, when something happens, the only person who's going to be there to stop it is you. That's a big deal. So it's not just me trying to protect a piece of metal because I just want to have fun with my guns. No, It's much bigger than that. It's this idea that I have to rely on myself. You can tell me all day long the police are going to be there, the police are going to be there, but they're not going to be.
Right.
They're just not.
I'm on
and
we clock out.
They were at Parkland.
We go home.
Exactly. Right?
Yeah, right.
So then
You
you
forgot.
add kids,
The fact
family
that
into
you
the mix,
forgot,
that
'cause you probably
ratchets it up
related
to a
to
whole
it.
nother level.
You think it's 24
What
hours.
about the piece of this that just
It's
sort of
not.
So, you know, every now and again you'll see a picture of like 3 dudes with big ass guns at Chipotle.
Yeah.
You know, like an open carry.
Mm-hmm.
Now I know if I walked into Chipotle and 3 guys came in with big ass guns on their back,
Yeah. You're
I'd
going to take
probably
notice.
I would take notice and I'd probably leave. I probably would. I would just be like, you know, look, and again, I'm here in California where that would be so out of the norm that whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
But for the person that's living in Texas, where you can do this, if I was in Chipotle, right, and 3 guys walk in, I probably would leave, knowing everything that you just said there, knowing that these guys are probably NRA members, and as far as I know, no NRA member has ever done a mass shooting, right? Okay, so you know, because you see this all the time, these celebrities, Michael Ian Black, like that on the show, who's on this rampage telling everyone that you guys are terrorists. I mean, really, that you're part of a terrorist organization. I mean, okay.
And so all the other 5 million members.
Right, but I think there is something about some of the optics of that. You know what I mean? Like, I would be nervous. Now, I get your point would be, well, those guys are going to protect you when the other guy walks in or whatever.
Yeah.
And some of that may be feelings over facts right there, but it just is.
The interesting thing about it, that is a big debate within the gun community as a whole. The idea of open carry versus concealed carry. I don't ever open carry, except for maybe if I'm out hunting or I'm on range or something like that. But that's a personal decision I'm choosing my own for various reasons. One, sometimes I rather not have the attention, and tactically, I like the advantage of having the element of surprise. You don't know I have a gun on me, so if I had to use it, I'm going to be reacting. Right? I'm not going into a place to shoot it up. If somebody decides to come into a place to shoot it up, I'm going to be reacting to that. So I need all the advantages I get from my personal perspective. So I want the element of surprise. There's some people who think in the alternative. They feel like just the mere presence of that gun is a deterrent from anyone who wants to come in and do something bad. So if guys casing out a couple of stores and then he sees there are some citizens in there with long guns and some that have handguns on the side of their hip, then that's a deterrent, right? I understand the alarm that people don't necessarily engage in interact with firearms get when they see people walking around with rifles, right? Even I've seen a couple of people in Texas do it, and initially my gut reaction, and I'll admit, was like, "What's going on here?" Now I'm very versed with firearms, and I have a gun too. So at that point, I actually almost welcome it. And the reason why is because if you're going to do something, I now get to see you attempt to do it. You get what I'm saying? There's a telegraph.
You are in a unique case on this one.
Yes, but I'm speaking from purely a place of personal preference, right? I'm not speaking on the whole for anyone else or anything like that. Me personally, I would rather like to know you have it. Right? If I can see it.
Right.
Because then I know where to focus my attention versus me kind of being lulled to a state of complacency because of its absence. And then all of a sudden somebody stands up and decides he wants to shoot the place up. And then I have to react to that. But again, that's tactics, right? That's just personal preference in that regard. However, I do understand the alarm that somebody would have seeing 3 guys walking to Chipotle with rifles, because it seems seemingly, especially to them, it seems like that's a bit excessive. I'm not gonna lie to you. If I can conceal carry a rifle, I would. Because it's better at defending me than a handgun was. The only reason I have a handgun is because it's small enough for me to conceal. And it allows me to live my life uninterrupted. Otherwise, I'd walk around with a rifle.
Okay, so we can't end without doing sort of what I think would be the big question for everything we've talked about here, and for someone that works with the NRA and who shows on NRA TV and all that. So what is going on in America right now that seems to be unique to our society? We do have more shootings here than I think virtually all other Western nations combined.
So, okay.
Feel free to fact check me on that if I butchered that one. But it does seem and even if I'm slightly off.
No, you're good. You're good.
It seems that there is something uniquely happening here. Now, I would argue that there's all sorts of mental health issues and probably prescription drugs and maybe non-prescription drugs and all sorts of other stuff.
So there are a couple of things. So I'll try to keep this as concise as possible because we are going to get into weeds for a split second here. So first of all, let's talk about mass shootings, right? Or school mass shootings, for instance. I recently just read a study from Northwestern University not too long ago, which talked about comparing the number of school mass shootings back in the 90s versus today. And what they concluded essentially was the perception is that it's happening more frequently, but it's not. It's actually on par, or even less now than it was then. Now,
Damn it, the fuck
people are going to be like, oh my God, how could you possibly say that? Google it. It's a Northwestern University.
Google it. Thank you. Let's say it
research.
again.
You
think it is because we see it on the news.
Research.
All right, we're going to grab it for you after this, and we'll have my guys link to it.
Absolutely. Okay. So, that being said, mass shootings account for a very, very, very marginal percentage of shootings in this country. Let's start off with the overall. So 35 to 36,000 people each year die from guns, right? I didn't specify gun violence, but just guns, because they don't do that. They'll just say gun violence, right? So about 60 to 65% of those, that 35,000 is suicides.
Thank you.
Now, what I'm not saying is we don't care about suicides. We do. However, when it comes to the idea and the issue of somebody shooting at me, it's not germane.
Yeah.
But then even still, if you want to make the argument, well, if we had less guns, we'd have less suicides. That's also not true, because our suicide rate is on par with every other major country. So if it was the case that the more guns you have, the more suicides, we'd be leading the charge. We don't.
Where there's a will, there's a way.
Exactly. Right. Even the more famous suicides we've had, they didn't use guns. So we set that number aside, which is a huge number.
Yeah.
65% is a huge number out of 36,000. So then you have about 1 to 3%, which are justifiable homicides. That's self-defense. That's including police shooting, criminals who are shooting at them, right? And people who use guns in self-defense, right? You got to set that aside, because that's not the issue we're trying to address. So set that number aside. And then you have about 5%, which are accidental, right? Kid finds a gun, pulls triggers, unfortunate, extremely unfortunate. However, I believe personally, half of that could easily be addressed with more education. So if we took the energy that we place now on trying to vilify guns and have national campaigns teaching people about gun safety, that will cut that number in half. Because a lot of these accidents are easily preventable, but they're just people who have guns who just don't know. And so if we spend time educating those people.
Do we know what percentage of that subset is getting those guns legally or illegally? Because I would imagine that a lot of it's probably illegal, which is why they don't know how to use the gun in the first place.
I'm not going to assume I have that answer, because I don't have that hard number.
Yeah.
But I do feel comfortable assuming that as well.
Yeah.
Right. And so if we take the accidents and set that aside, purely homicides, we're looking at around 7 to 10,000 every year. Right. Now that's a different looking number. Right, we've accounted for all of the context here with those other shooters. Now, the vast majority, I'd say close to 80% that I've read in a couple of articles, of those homicides are happening in the inner cities of our country. Right? So then reason goes, all right, so let's look at those inner cities and let's look at the dynamics there, right? You have low jobs, lack of economic opportunity, destroyed households, and a narco economy that but creates necessity for this type of violence. So if we dealt with the socioeconomic aspects of what's going on in those areas, right? Do we really have a gun problem? Just think about it. I know other communities filled with Black people. They have guns. They don't have the same level of violence. Because I only say Black people because most people associate the inner city with Black people, right? But the reason why we have that high level of concentration of violence is because of the conditions in those environments. And then even within those communities, the vast majority of those people in those communities are good people. And it's a very minor group of people who are creating a large number of the violence, right? So there's something to be said. Do we really have a gun problem, or do we have a socioeconomic suicide problem in this country? Because at the end of the day, this 35 to 36,000 that people are assuming is all gun violence by way of homicides, people shooting at other people to kill them, it's not the case. We're looking at closer to 7 to 10,000, if that. And so you take those numbers and you compare them to other countries, then how does it look?
Yeah, well, I'm so glad that we finally did this, and we will definitely do this again because I think this story and everything we talk about here is just going to continue. I mean, these are the battles that we're now fighting on many fronts related to the Constitution and free speech and free expression and your ability to own your life and all that stuff.
That's all we ask. This is just let me. And I'll say one last thing. Yeah. People, there are a lot of people who was like, "Why do you feel the need to carry a gun? Why?"
Weeks ago, and he kind of laid out what happened to him that day and subsequently everything that's happened. So let's just start there because that's kind of what put you on the map.
Okay. So to preface it, I don't like to refer myself as a survivor because I wasn't in the building that was shot into, and I think that cheapens the pain and tragedy of people who were in the building. So what happened with me that day? It was fourth period. I was in my fourth period class, and all of a sudden the alarms ring. So we go into the hallway. We're walking out, and we hear two little pops. I don't know if two textbooks fell. Fireworks. I really had no idea. So we run back, and I go and reach for the.
It's Halloween. South Sudan.
Jermaine, too soon.
Sure.
اسماعيل البردي هسه داعش ولا لا؟ لا داعش. علينا أن نهزم الموحد المجير، علينا أن نهزم الفكر المتطرف، علينا أن ننشر التعليم، علينا أن ننشر الإسلام المتسامح. عشان كذا فتطهرت كل الدواعي، والحمد لله هسه المنطقة أمينة. بتعلمنا يلا سامع. ايش قد داعش موجودين؟ 60 70 60 70 كل ترى النوافذ مالتها. It's going to be maybe 60, 70 meters away. There's an ISIS held building and they're firing it. Vice News travelled to Iraq with the Golden Division, Iraq Special Forces, as they launched an offensive against the Islamic State in the western province of Anbar. For 2 years, the Islamic State has controlled most of Anbar, but now, one by one, the towns and cities are being taken back. The target of the Golden Division is the strategic city of Heat, gateway to the IS stronghold of Fallujah. But to get there, they'll have to clear the IS-held villages surrounding it. It's a difficult task. Anbar is the crucible of Iraq's insurgency, the country's Sunni heartland, hostile to the Shia government. Leading the convoy to recapture the city of Heat is Major Salam. He has served with the Iraqi Special Forces for over a decade.
بالإضافة إلى أهميتها كعقدة مواصلات هيت مدينة تاريخية، أهمية هيت تكمن في أنها هدف قطع امداد العدو. أولا هي معقل رئيسي لو تم السيطرة عليه سيعني تحرير ارتفاع الروح المعنوية لكثير من المقاتلين.
Although most Islamic State fighters have fled this village or been killed, Major Salam and his unit are rooting out suspected collaborators and informants that have been left behind.
يعني بس اجيب لك مستلزماتي وانا منتسب لغيرها. مستلزماتي هاي موجوده في البيت. مين هذا؟ سعودي قبائلي افغانستان على
So these are the first Iraqi soldiers to enter the village of Cherry for 2 years, which has been under the control of ISIS. Right now, Major Salam is meeting with the village elders.
والحمد لله هسه المنطقة أمينة مؤمنة ولو الحمد لله أنا لا أقول.
To find IS agents, Major Salam relies heavily on local intelligence. This woman tells him that his son was killed by the Islamic State, aided by local collaborators still present in the village.
ابنك لما ما يوحد هو اللي كان موجود يجيب الشيعة مرات سلام راح يفوتن يلا
A local sheikh leads them to the home of the suspected men.
الله منك براء الإسلام منكم براء شوهت الدين شوهت الإسلام كل شيء نعرف والشيعي سميته رافضي والكردي سميته زنديق واليزيدية أخذتوها سبايا. هاي انتم لا تحكي لي ابن أمياد ليش قتلتوه؟ ليش ذبحتوه؟ اي طبعا انتم ما قتلتوا بس انتم اللي دليتوا عليه. والله انتم الله منكم براء. عدنان اعلمك شلون تضحك. الا كسر سنونك بحقك. اعلمك شلون تضحك. اعلمك تاخذوهم تشتتوهم فورا روحوا للجامعة كلهم. يلا انتم ارهابيين دواعش باعتراف اهل المنطقه.
Residents claim that this family also ran the Islamic State Media Center, screening recruitment videos and indoctrinating the village's youth. The major has ordered all remaining military-age males to gather outside the local mosque.
الحمد لله على السلامة. فضلتكم هذه بضاعتكم ردت إليكم. يقول هذا خبيث وهذا خبيث. اللي ويا داعش خلي يقول هذا داعش. لا يستحي معه. رعد حمود ناصر. هذا جو. اياد علي ناصر. جو عندنا قوات اليمين. حمد الله حميد صالح. اسماعيل بردي. لا خلي واحد يروح يجيبه. النعم الموجود هنا. وانا اسماعيل. النعم الموجود انا زكيني حماد كنت نتفق في الشرطه وياه. حماد زكي. ولا علاقه. اسال المنطقه هاي كلها اذا طالع فجاه من بيتي من جو الدواعش. اسماعيل بردي شو يقولون عليه؟ داعش كلها الاسماء عندك داعش، الاسماء عندك كلها داعش. اسماعيل البردي هشام مراقب اخويا طلع يجيب لي حميم حاتم الجيدان وياك. اسماعيل بردي هسه داعش ولا لا؟ لا داعش.
Major Salam relies on the council of the local population to determine if his list of suspects are guilty or not.
محمد عواد، محمد قصي عواد. ما حد يحكي هذا داعش ولا لا؟ ليش تسكتون عن شفت عليه داعش شفتوا عليه وقف انا باي يا شهيد يا شهيد
Prisoners are divided by level of importance and taken to Baghdad for processing and interrogation. Whether or not these residents are guilty, their fate now rests in the hands of Iraq's intelligence agencies. So for the last couple of days, we've been clearing out villages surrounding Heat. There's only one more left. Its name is Mohammadi, and that's where we're heading now. It's the fiercest resistance we've seen in the areas around Heat so far, and it's a worrying sign about what we find in We spot a car speeding towards us. Alright, this has been pretty insane and not what we expected at all. And then just a few seconds ago, a car bomb was driving towards us. And thankfully, an incredibly sharp shooter up the Tolka managed to kill the driver before it hit us.
محمد على اساس هي اراهنوا عليها انه خمسه قوي بعرب الجنسيه باجانب بافغان بعراقيين احتمال اكيد بعراقيين منها من المنطقه يعني بس الحمد لله شفت النتائج كلها الصبر بصالحات امنيه والسيارات صارت وشغل كاملين ما عندنا اي ثاني ولا عندنا جبهه ولا شهداء والحمد لله وشكرا.
So the first stage of the operation to recapture Heat has been to liberate the villages surrounding the city. Now the first couple we went to, we retreated like liberators. And then today, we rolled into the town of Mohammadi. And unlike the previous town, everyone who sees us driving past hasn't waved hello, but they turn their backs. I think it's safe to say that people living in this area feel that they have a much stronger affiliation with IS than they do with the Iraqi government.
The Major's unit had captured a young IS militant. His role was making improvised explosive devices.
فلا تشعر بالمهم انت بمحنه تطلع من محنتك، اذا تعاونت ويانا حتطلع من محنتك. شلون تسوون السبحه؟
سيدي الشعيره بجدها الشعيره بجدها منها اذا عندك منها تصير لقيتها جدها شوي عمليه كراش بجدها. كيف تستغرق عمليه صنع السبحه واحده؟ ساعه ونص هو شغل جدا. وش قد مطلوب منكم تصنعون سبح باليوم؟ اذا تصنع 5 باليوم انت ملك. انت ملك اذا تصنع 5 سبح. يا ابني يعلمون. ايش بيهم؟ شياب يعلموهم؟ ليش؟ ما يفيدون. يعلمون الشباب. شنو كانت رغبتك انه تصير؟ قبل ما انتظر تشاء بعد. شنو كان رغبتك؟
الدراسة.
كم الدراسة ليش انت من الدولة الإسلامية؟ يعني على أساس الدولة الإسلامية طلعت بغداد؟ ناخذ بغداد وأنت تروح تكمل دراستك ببغداد. طلعت من المدرسة توكلت على الله وقلت حنتمي للدولة الإسلامية واقتنعت أو ما اقتنعت المهم رحت للدولة الإسلامية.
لقد وجدنا الكثير من الأطفال الذين فجروا أنفسهم تجاه قطاعات الأمنية. نحن بصراحة قبل أن يكونوا أعداءنا نشعر عليهم بالحزن لما وصلوا إليه مرحلة في هذا الفكر من حيث تفجير أنفسهم ومن حيث
Following Major Salam these last few days, one thing that's been very apparent is a very active effort to engage with the local population and tribal elders, forms relationships with them, try to get food to them, shelter for them, and also more importantly try and get intelligence from them.
أن بعض العوائل النازحة الموجودة في منطقة في هذه القرية من محافظة الأنبار، بعض هذه العوائل لم ترجع إلى مناطق التي تم تحريرها بسبب تفجير منازلهم مخبطة من داعش. نقوم حاليا بإيصال بعض المساعدات البسيطة التي استقطعناها من أرزاقنا وأرزاق مقاتلينا قضية إطعام هؤلاء الأطفال الذين هم بحاجة ماسة إليهم. الله يخليك يا كيف عمرها؟ ها؟ يا اللي سجل بالمدرسة ما خلوك تسجل بالمدارس؟ ضاعت المدرسة.
اخوي احنا وانا مدرسة عمارنا منو؟ نفك الحانة. وانا المدرسة.
ان شاء الله حجي الله.
What he's doing now is using his forces to take them in pickup trucks to ISIS houses that ISIS have abandoned to give these families shelter and a place to sleep.
يلا سام روح.
والله عن جزاكم خير من تشعرون
خير يا حجي هو هذا واجبنا بس اكو امور انسانيه.
أنا متزوج وعندي طفل واحد. دائما كانت حياة الزوجية حياة مضطربة بسبب العمل العسكري. من الصعوبة أنه يعيش الإنسان دائما بعيد عن رؤية زوجته ورؤية أطفاله.
والله المستقبل خير من قبل كان دواعش دمرونا والله وجودنا في الجراح قاعدين الشوارع الأقمار الجقارة على الشارع قبل الجقارة ما حيشربها على الشارع التليفون ما كان حد يشغله اللي يشوفونه يصفون جلد.
من وقف الدولة الإسلامية صارت جهات مكافحة الإرهاب للعوائل المدنية. باكر إلى المساحة إن شاء الله.
Major Salam's approach to winning hearts and minds is working. Locals pass on intelligence about an Islamic State tunnel on the outskirts of their village. We join the unit as they headed out to investigate. As they begin their search, a local man arrives saying that he is losing information for the major.
يا ابن الحلال انت بس انا جيتكم شو في هذا البيت كان يترددون حد وين اشكال
ابد ما اقدر استقبل اشوفهم متبقين هذا بيت وهذا بيتك وهذا بيتك هذا النصب عندكم حلم يعني عندهم هذا الهيكل دم لا تخبط حكي والله ابو خبر بيتك بصفيتهم نعم من كانوا يترددون بس يقطع لي كلام وين اسمعني من كانوا يترددون انا ما اقول لك اما القوه وانت قاعد ببيتك احكي لي كنت تشوف دواش هذا الدواش شو العبسين اللي اسود واللي كان نهاري ما ادري شلون قايل واللي اشكال ما اعرف اذا هذه المنطقه دي اعطهم حظ واقول عرفت والله لو عرفه لو انا ابني لو قلت شنو البيت؟ مال من؟ بيت مال واحد شرطي مال واحد شرطي؟ اي فخر خير والله خاف
Despite the potential risk of booby traps, Major Salam and his men enter the suspected building.
لا مو هذا مو هذا مبدئيا ايه تقوم منها
They secure the home and find the militants have fled. By removing their beards, Islamic State fighters can blend into the local population, making it harder for Major Salam to identify and arrest them. The Islamic State may have been defeated on the battlefield in Hamadi, but the harder task will be reinstating the rule of the Baghdad government and holding the ground. Major Salam's civil engagement has so far proved effective, but as his Special Forces unit advances towards Heat, they leave behind a holding force of undisciplined paramilitary units known as the Hashid al-Shabi, or Popular Mobilization Forces. Their arrival in Hamadi has already caused a problem. Locals have complained that paramilitaries have already been abusing their power, looting homes and stealing property.
يلا ارجعوا كورياتكم اي واحد قضيت امر بدون تنسيق ويانا ينضرب مباشره اطلاق نار يلا من العالم لا مو بدك يلا
The fact that offences like this have been committed whilst the Iraqi Special Forces are still present in the area raises the question of what things will be like when they leave. In the former IS building, Major Salam and his men find a discarded mobile phone belonging to an Islamic State fighter.
هذا فيديو احد المواطنين اللي تم اعتقالهم من قبل تنظيم داعش في داخل هذا المنزل وتم العثور عليه في داخل هذا المنزل تحقيق مع احد المواطنين ثم قتله.
The interrogation took place on the floor in front of us.
فردات نفس الفردات نفس الفردات هاي الأصوات لقينا هاي الأصوات قتل إنسان بريء بمجرد اشتباه به.
Meanwhile, a group of locals have detained 3 men they say belong to the Islamic State. A village elder is asked who recognises them from the region.
التوكل عادك والعيش
Like the rest, the men will be taken to Baghdad, biometrically scanned, interrogated, and checked for jihadi activity. It's been 4 weeks since we joined Major Salam as he advances towards Heat. Vital to the Islamic State supply lines, the city is said to be defended by hundreds of militants. Tomorrow morning, the final assault will begin.
So in a few hours, you're waking up and you're going to liberate Heat. And it's guaranteed to be a dangerous mission. How do you feel? Scared? Excited? Was your wife, kids, then worried?
عندهم واحد صار له 3 سنوات قاتل داعش كل المناطق فصار طبيعي يعني شيء طبيعي لو اروح الدوام ارجع او ما ارجع علم واحد يعني يتوقعون كل الاحوال انه اذا التحق بعد اخر التحق اذا ما اجي
هذا بالرمادي تحرير ما زنقوره
واحد بالضبط
ايه كان عندنا اتقدم ورماد بدي التليفون مالي بعد التليفون لقيت والدي يتصل عليه بس شو قال الخير بركه صار عندك ولد
بعد اذا انزل للبيت ابو اريد اجي ذاك يوم 3 ايام نزلت بس اريد ارتاح شو كنت تخلص اجازه عن مرتاح بس اذا يقولوا لي انزل همين ابوك كمل هيك يا رب.
I think Daesh will be defeated on the battlefield in the next year. But then what do you think will happen? Do you think there'll be peace?
يصير الشرطة والدة والعشيرة والثغرات وكل بيمت بعد ما يرجع لغاية الملعب أصلا حصل الثغرات شغل الثغرات أنا أفوز من فلان أنا صرت بالحشد بيجي يستاهل بالشرطة أنا أقتله
We're finally approaching the city of Heat. Our point of entry is this very thick tree line. The first vehicles in our convoy have been hit with sniper fire, PKC machine gun fire, some RPGs coming in, and the tanks and weapons. But it looks like there's still some movement going forward, and we might be able to push our way through within the next hour or two.